This video is going to be about social media use and drug addiction. Not so much drug addiction, but the first part we'll touch on it. And I was actually going to write an essay. I had written an essay on this topic with these links here, and I was going to make it into a video essay, but I thought it would be more appropriate to touch on it in more of a live, raw format. I don't know. These are some pretty daunting conclusions that I'm going to draw today based on the information that we're going to look at. But it might be stuff that people already kind of know. It's just is different to put the data together and read these things out loud. So the first link that we have is from the Addiction Center. New study suggests excessive social media use is comparable to drug addiction. Now, that's a pretty bold claim, but we're going to dive into why that's being made in the first place. I'll read to start, and then we can jump around as need be. But in today's society, the amount of time that people spend on social media is constantly increasing. In fact, the average user now spends approximately 136 minutes over 2 hours on social networking sites each and every day. According to a new study published in the Journal of Behavioral Addictions, not only does time spent on social media waste countless hours of the day, excessive use is also starting to affect people's decision making abilities and make them more likely to engage in risky behaviors. Okay. Leader of the study likens the connection between heavy social media use and impaired risky decision making to the same decisiveness found in the brains of people with substance use disorders. Similar to these addicts, excessive social networking site users, they'll call them SNS users, display preoccupation with social media platforms when they aren't using them, mood of modification when they access these sites, and tolerance to social rewards obtained on these sites from interactions. Well, yeah, Twitter really pops into my mind when I think of um, the digital reward affirmation feedback back loop, especially on social media in terms of interacting with people, not just like views, but a lot of times a heated back and forth that boils down to is or is perceived solely through a lens of like a like dislike ratio or reply like ratio. I don't know exactly what the proper formula is these days, but back to this article. Okay, so let's just look at the study here. And the study is to examine the relationship between the social media use and risky decision making as the claim outlined, or the hypothesis. But I guess the study already happened, so they drew the conclusion in the first paragraph there. But the study itself, Meshi and his co-authors asked 71 participants to take the Bergen Facebook Addiction Scale questionnaire (BFAS) to measure their psychologic dependence on Facebook. So the survey had questions about their preoccupation with the social media platform, their feelings when unable to use it, unsuccessful attempts to quit, and the impact that the site had on their job or studies. And I'd like to point out before we even really read the rest of it here that Facebook, this is more of a conjecture, but Facebook is probably more vanilla in terms of the insidious effects of the especially of the addiction and algorithmic system. And it is much more social and interaction based. Um, and maybe a lot of, maybe I'm calling it like plain because it's the most popular and it's used by a lot of um, older people, older generations. So I don't know. I don't know exactly what I'm trying to say other than Facebook back then relative to say TikTok right now, I think there is going to be a noticeable and clear difference in how intensely those platforms affect people's brains, especially considering that TikTok skews much younger and Facebook skews much older, and increasingly younger and younger people are getting access to the internet and smartphones. Their access to this content unfolds in practically an unlimited way. And those factors, the age factor and the accessibility factor, and then the changing algorithm from longer format and text-based interaction to rapid fire, open-ended feedback loops in the like 5 to 30-second range. You can imagine why that might be much more affecting of the brain's natural reward system than scrolling through Facebook and leaving a few replies and wishing your uncle a happy birthday. TikTok is a different beast. But anyway, they had the participants perform 100 trails of the Iowa gambling task, that's the IGT, which is a common exercise used by psychologists to measure decision making. The users must identify outcome patterns in decks of cards to choose the best possible deck. Participants of the study were presented with four virtual decks on a computer and told that each deck holds cards that will either reward or penalize them in the form of game money. The goal of the task is to win as much money as possible by choosing good decks, which reward the player rather than bad decks that contain more penalizing cards. Mishi and his colleagues found a direct correlation between how badly the participants did in the task to how excessively they used social media. That's really all that says it all. The worse people performed by choosing from bad decks, the more excessive their social media use. So there was a clear, direct association, correlation. The better individuals did in the task, the less their social media use. This demonstrates that more severe social media use is associated with worse decision making skills, in particular, more risky decision making. People who abuse drugs like opioids, cocaine, and meth have similar outcomes on the Iowa gambling task as those addicted to social media, showing that both addictions cause the same deficiency in decision making. And you would imagine that probably applies to memory too, and the adjacent effects. And I don't know about you, that seems wild. It's similar to the results of those who abuse opioids, cocaine, and meth. There is an equal lapse in proficiency by people who use social media. And this is Facebook 5 years ago. Think about TikTok now. So let's go to the next one. Teens spend an average of 4.8 hours a day on social media. Well, I kind of had these in order for a reason. And this headline, in light of the conclusion from the last article, the last study, I think you know what I'm trying to portray here or convey here. But what are they looking at? Over half of teens spend at least 4 hours daily on social media. So that's double already what the last study found for the average Facebook user. Or it might not have been the average Facebook user, but the average person in that study in on the platform Facebook. Just over half report spending at least 4 hours per day using a variety of social media apps such as YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and X. So they're all included on this. 1,500 adolescents. The use amounts to 4.8 hours a day for the average US teen across 7 platforms. Low as 4.1 for the 13-year-olds and as high as 5.8 for the 17-year-olds. Girls spend nearly an hour more on social media than boys, respectively. So, okay, percent spending at least 4 hours per day. So 15 and up, definitely over half. 13 and 14, almost half, which should be just as concerning. And I'd be curious to know if this is an accurate trend line. You know, there's probably 12, 11, 10, 9, 8-year olds. Also, consuming this content in this way. I know some personally. These data are from the Familial and Adolescent Health Survey conducted by Gallup. The survey collected data from 6,643 parents and 1,591 adolescents. Okay, so the parents themselves are reporting. So if anything, it might be underreported. I mean, I guess it could be overreported too, but I would doubt that a parent fully knows how much, especially if their child has a device like a phone or iPad or a computer that they don't keep from them. There's no way they realistically know how much their child is using it because probably using it a lot when they're not looking. What are the favorite social media apps? YouTube and TikTok are by far the most popular apps. That's not surprising. And hey, I'll admit, I use YouTube a lot. This video is going on YouTube. I will also admit that I find myself, I go on YouTube to check on my subscriptions and my home feed, and I never intend to watch the shorts or the reels. I think YouTube is shorts, but I always end up scrolling on shorts, and I don't know how it happens. Even if I like intentionally try not to, or unless I click a video right away, which most of the time I'll have a playlist, but it's so sneaky. And I intentionally don't use TikTok. And I've intentionally not been using Instagram because the short format is just, I find myself getting sucked down a rabbit hole and I don't even realize it's happening. It just, the platforms are set up to draw you into that endless scrolling. And it works because unless you're actively, consciously making a decision about where you're navigating through these platforms, they're navigating for you. Don't kid yourself. So YouTube, point is, YouTube is becoming potentially as worse as the other ones, and self-admittedly, I'm falling into that trap. But teens report spending an average of 1.9 hours a day on YouTube and 1.5 hours a day on TikTok. Okay, they go over parental restrictions. We don't need to touch on that as much. But so you get the point. This is just to highlight, extrapolate out this data and show how it's not only adults using Facebook, it's most prominently teens using other apps such as TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram, which I'd say those platforms are probably, I mean, they're probably worse in terms of how viciously the algorithm rewires your brain. This is one article I found on the TikTok brain syndrome. It doesn't give too much hard data or science, but it does report a self-reported survey. So short-term memory and the ability to concentrate are also, oh, binging on an endless stream of 15 to 30-second long videos slashes our attention span like no other type of media. Short-term memory and the ability to concentrate are also affected. Yep. Devoted TikTokers report that they are unable to focus on longer video formats. 50% of users admit they find longer videos stressful. Stressful is an interesting term to use for watching a YouTube video, but I believe that. And self-reported, maybe I'll take that with a grain of salt, but still, it should be impressive and or frightening that over half of people will admit they don't want to watch a longer YouTube video because it's stressful. The optimal length is between 21 and 34 seconds, so that's like goldfish level attention span. And I mean, hey, like think about it. TikTok is the amount of content you could absorb like per minute, per hour if you're, scrolling pretty aggressively. It's unbelievable. And the way TikTok is set up, that type of content, it's usually like every different video probably has some type of like sound or music playing. It's like text on the screen, and then they're doing whatever, and each video is completely random from the next, especially on the For You page. It's just an infinite sea of chaotic stimulation, and it's fun. Hey, it works, but it is the open-ended feedback loop that never gets closed. So you are like every scroll, you are actively rewiring your brain around that feedback loop, and it does become an addiction that you don't even consciously recognize yourself falling into. That maybe most people, especially most teams, have this addiction that has already been shown to be worse, if or equal to, if not worse than um, opioids, meth, cocaine, when it comes to memory and decision making abilities and impairment. So that's basically the point, and what I don't know, people maybe should be thinking about a little bit. I'm not saying don't use TikTok or whatever. I'm just saying be aware of what these platforms are doing to you and how the algorithm is almost predatory in nature. And if you're not consciously aware of how it's affecting you and setting boundaries for yourself, then man, that's how we get numbers like that. So this last one here is an actual study that looks at the links, associations between the substance use or the social media use and depression, anxiety, stress, and memory loss. It's a real study, but it's called Research on Adolescence Regarding the Indirect Effect of Depression, Anxiety, and Stress Between TikTok Use Disorder and Memory Loss. So this one looks specifically at TikTok, and it's from the International Journal of Environmental Research and Public Health. So we'll take this one probably with the most weight compared to all or the three prior we've looked at, a couple of which weren't even like actual studies. But this research involved participation of 3,036 Chinese students in the first and second years of senior high school. They were active users of TikTok. Mediating effect of depression, anxiety, and stress between TikTok use disorder and memory loss was investigated. A forward and a forward and backward digit span test was applied to measure memory loss. Structural equation modeling was established, and SPSS AMOS was used for analysis. The results show a partial mediation effect from depression and anxiety between TikTok use disorder and forward digit span. A partial mediation effect of depression, anxiety, and stress between TikTok use disorder and backward digit span is also shown. These results also show gender differences. Attention should be given to male students who have more depression, anxiety, and stress than female students. They also have more memory loss. So I will say, Chinese participants, there may be cultural factors that are affecting the outcomes of this study relative to how we might observe something like this in the United States. But the actual the mental neurological mechanism and effect on memory loss and feedback rewards centers, there's going to be a lot of similarities there. And for our purposes, this is going to be just fine. So let's be careful about how much we 1,700 male, 1,300 or 1,700 female, 1,300 male, average age of 16. So yeah, that lands right in the middle of the age range we were kind of looking at for the other studies. All right, we won't go into the actual measurements. Unless you have a statistics degree, you're not gonna get a lot out of that. But we'll look at the conclusions here and see what they found out. TikTok use disorder is positively linked to memory loss and also positively linked to depression, anxiety, and stress. Depression, anxiety, and stress are positively linked to memory loss. Furthermore, depression, anxiety, and stress have mediating effect between TikTok use disorder and memory loss. A partial mediating effect A partial mediation effect of depression and anxiety between TikTok use disorder and forward digit span is shown. A partial mediation effect of depression, anxiety, and stress between TikTok use disorder and backward digit span is also shown. These results also show gender differences. Attention should be given to the male students who have more depression, anxiety, and stress than the female students. They also have more memory loss. I'd be curious to know. I'd be curious to know if that was reflected the same in the states, or there'd be a swap between male and female. Either way, that's ridiculous. Um, I mean, we might have already known that, but it is positively linked to not only depression, anxiety, and stress, but memory loss. And memory loss, in my opinion, would be the more concerning one because you can easily imagine how spending hours of your day on social media, especially TikTok, can give someone anxiety in terms of reshaping how they perceive the world and just viewing. I mean, everyone's TikTok is pretty different, especially the Chinese compared to the American. They're all watching math and learning technical skills, and U.S. TikTok is huh, I couldn't give you one word to describe it. But in terms of how it, gives would might give someone anxiety and depression, um, it's you're constantly perceiving the world through someone else's filtered, modified lens, and these things compile and aggregate, and they really do warp your perception of the world because these people who are posting on TikTok and generating engagement and interaction are not representative of the people who are on average out there living their lives. You're seeing loads of superficial content, fake interaction that is intended to mislead you and to promote a sort of lifestyle or, you know, an influencer aesthetic or something like that. I mean, there's all kinds of things that are published on TikTok, but these this data should be a little bit concerning, if nothing else for the memory loss, especially because maybe we get a little more sad collectively as a result of this insane technological advancement. I can see that. I can get past that. Us as humans, maybe we become a little bit more aware of what's going on around us, the hardship that others face, the atrocity in other parts of the world on a daily basis. And maybe that inability to be ignorant does render us a little bit more depressed on an average basis. But the memory loss in and of itself, the hindrance to your ability to actually function efficiently as a person, that should be where we take a look at this and say, okay, what are we actually doing to ourselves, and how does it affect our brain when we engage with content this much, this type of content? And like I said, I'm guilty of this just as much as anyone else is, especially on YouTube. But again, when this is affecting how well we function as effective and useful adults in this world, hey, let's figure that out. And if the teens who are arguably in the phase of their life where they're being developed to turn into the person that's going to be contributing to the world is affected by 5 hours a day on social media in light of outcomes similar to intense substance use disorder, it's like let's put the pieces together and figure something out, man. And it starts with the self and the household unit, and it starts with, figuring out what your kids are up to and turning their curiosity of social media and it turn that into a curiosity about something interesting, a craft, a hobby, a story, a sport. I mean, harness that into something that is going to develop them into a person that the world is going to be a better place for having, you know? And we're not going to rant about how to raise your children, but stay off of TikTok because the algorithm really does rewire your brain. And maybe I will make this into a video essay and we can give it a little more pop, draw out a little more factual data, and maybe that might have a little bit more reach. But like I said, I thought a raw reaction would be pretty sufficient for this. And I wanted to bring some of these, bring some of this and just put it out there because I don't see people talking about it in this way. I really don't. And I think I've said it so many times, I just think it's important. And I'll start the discussion and I'll post all these links and I'd love for you guys to discuss it below. Maybe I'm missing something. Maybe I'm viewing this data in a biased way, and I'm always viewing data in a biased way because I'm biased. But if we can be transparent about that, then hey, that's fantastic. So yeah, get off TikTok, man.